Lawmakers in both parties demanding to see the findings of a House ethics investigation of Matt Gaetz for allegations of sexual misconduct and illegal drug use. But the House Speaker hopes the report is never released.
I do not. No, I think it's a terrible breach of protocol. The rules of the House have always been that a former member is beyond the jurisdiction of the Ethics Committee, and so I don't think that's relevant. I would strongly request the Ethics Committee not issue a report, because that is not the way we do things in the House, and I think that would be a terrible precedent.
Moses Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House that claims to be ethical and pure, doesn't want any unethical or impure information about Matt Gaetz to be released to the public, or really any senator tasked with determining his fate as Attorney General. And he's got a bullshit reason why.
Gaetz, as you know, had been facing a House Ethics Committee investigation over numerous allegations, including one that he had sex with a 17-year-old. We should note that Gaetz denies that allegation. On Wednesday, you said this about the House Ethics Committee's investigation.
The Speaker of the House is not involved in that, can't be involved in that, so I'm not really the person probably to answer that question.
But on Friday, you did want something to do with it. You said the House Ethics Committee report should not be released. In between those two comments, you did speak with President-elect Trump. Did he encourage you to change your position and to squash the House Ethics Committee report from being released?
No, he did not. The president and I have literally not discussed one word about the ethics report, not once. And I've been with him quite a bit this week between Washington and Mar-a-Lago, and last night in Madison Square Garden. But this is what I'll tell you about that. What I said is entirely consistent. The Speaker of the House is not involved in ethics committee work, can't be, shouldn't be, because the Speaker can't put a thumb on the scale or have anything to do with that. So I have no idea what the contents of this report would be. I didn't even know about it, Jake, until the middle of this week when it was announced in the press. What I have said with regard to the report is that it should not come out. And why? Because Matt Gaetz resigned from Congress. He is no longer a member. There's a very important protocol and tradition and rule that we maintain that the House Ethics Committee's jurisdiction does not extend to non-members of Congress. I think that would be a Pandora's box. I don't think we want the House Ethics Committee using all of its vast resources and powers to go after private citizens. And that's what Matt Gaetz is now. He is no longer a member of Congress. So I think that's a really important guardrail for the institution.
Everyone knows that the report on Gaetz' stories of sleeping with a 17-year-old had been investigated, and the damning details were set to be released last Friday. So he quickly resigned from Congress to give Johnson the ability to protect him, with that nonsense claim that it would be damning to have the information.
The House Ethics Committee in the past has released reports of individuals who resigned from Congress. Congressman Bonner, Congressman Lukens. The House Ethics Committee, after the resignation of Mark Foley, even began an investigation and then released a report. So it's not unprecedented. And there are a number of Senate Republicans. I mean, this report's already done. It's not a question of continuing it. It's finished. There are a number of Senate Republicans who want to see it. They say it's important to their advice and consent rule. Don't the American people, and more importantly, don't the people who are going to be voting on Matt Gaetz' confirmation to be the top law enforcement officer of the United States, don't they have a right to see that report that has been paid for by taxpayer dollars?
Two important points here, Jake. Number one, my understanding is that the report is not finished. It's in a rough draft form, was not yet ready to be released. And since Matt Gaetz left the Congress, I don't think it's appropriate to do so. There have been, I understand, I think 2 exceptions to the rule over the whole history of Congress and the history of the Ethics Committee. But I wasn't the Speaker at that time. I'm the Speaker now. The Speaker does not have the authority to stop the release of a report by the Ethics Committee, but I've just simply said what I believe is an obvious point, that we don't want to go down that road. I don't think you want the House Ethics Committee investigating Jake Tapper or any other private citizen. You're not a member of the institution.
Notice the dishonest Christian Mike Johnson completely blew past the correction that releasing this kind of report actually is not unprecedented or that it'll destroy the institution. He just stated that now he's the Speaker and he won't put his thumb on the scales, except for the fact that he already did by strongly suggesting that the report not be released. He lies right in front of our faces with an ease and comfort that the Bible probably warns believers against trusting. I'm just wondering when someone's going to ask him the most obvious question. Aren't you Matt Gaetz and Donald Trump just worried that the information in the report will expose some very disturbing truths about the guy that's been nominated to be Attorney General?
Why be against the transparency? And listen, this report may clear him. I mean, for somebody who's going to be the top federal law enforcement officer in this country.
Yeah, so I don't know anything about the contents of the report because the way the rules work, of course, the Speaker of the House can't put a thumb on the scale or be involved in an ethics committee report. What I do know is that the comments about this being there's a precedent for releasing reports is not exactly accurate. Yeah, there were 2 breaches of the tradition in the past under very extraordinary circumstances. I don't think this meets that criteria.
Okay, pause for a second. This is where you have to pay attention to the wording coming from liars. This is how Mike Johnson operates. He shifts his comments when cornered to his opinion now, instead of addressing the fact that he tried to claim that there's no precedent. So now, all he said is, I don't think this meets the criteria. So who cares what you think? I thought you said you're not supposed to be putting your thumb on the scales. So let's let him finish this blatant dodge where he completely goes on a completely unrelated sanitation of Matt Gaetz, like a fake Christian would.
Look, Matt Gaetz is a colleague of mine. We've been serving together for more than 8 years. He's one of the brightest minds in Washington or anywhere for that matter. And he knows everything about how the Department of Justice has been weaponized and misused. And he will be a reformer. And I think that's why the establishment in Washington is so shaken up about this pick. But with regard to the report, there's a very important reason for the tradition and the rule that we almost always followed. And that is that we don't issue investigations and ethics reports on people who are not members of Congress. I'm afraid that that would open a Pandora's box because the jurisdiction of the Ethics Committee is limited to those who are serving in the institution.
It's not just Democrats. Here's Republican Senator John Cornyn.
I think there should not be any limitation on the Senate Judiciary Committee's investigation, including whatever the House Ethics Committee has generated.
So you want to see it?
Absolutely.
He's open to issuing a subpoena to the House Ethics Committee. How do you see this playing out?
Well, look, I hope that the Ethics Committee will stick by our tradition and protocol for the reasons I just articulated. I think this would take us down a path there where I don't know how we'd return.
He thinks their concerns are about Gaetz wanting to shake up the Justice Department. Not that former Speaker McCarthy, Representative Markwayne Mullin, and several others have come forward to explicitly claim that Matt Gaetz bragged about trafficking underage girls for drug-fueled sex parties that his accomplice already went down for. He's even standing by his hope to shield Gaetz from accountability by going against Republican senators who also want the findings to be released. So does anyone believe that Johnson would try to suppress the findings of an ethics investigation into Hunter Biden or maybe another bullshit one into Joe Biden if all this information was out there about them?
In the meantime, President Trump has made it clear if his nominees get stuck, he wants the Senate to move ahead and possibly the House cooperating with this idea of recess appointments. Forbes says this, that lawmakers in both the House and Senate would have to agree for the Senate to adjourn for more than 10 days as the Constitution requires both chambers to agree in order to adjourn for more than 3 days. So there'd have to be House and Senate action. National Review says this about your role in that. It says the very idea that the Speaker of the House would collude with the president to undermine the Senate's constitutional role and effectively make the legislative branch a passive plaything of the executive should outrage any member of Congress. Would you take steps to put things into recess so those appointments could happen?
Listen, I believe in the principle of a new president being able to choose his team, and that used to not be a controversial notion. We're in a time of very divided government and a very partisan atmosphere in Washington. I wish it were not. I wish the Senate would simply do its job of advice and consent and allow the president to put the persons in his cabinet of his choosing.
Even when it comes to recess appointments to bypass Congress, the very branch of government that he's a part of, Speaker Johnson is openly siding with a president that's always said he wants to consolidate power to the executive. We should really take note of who Mike Johnson is telling us that he works for. Well, good thing Shannon Bream, though, didn't take her foot off of his neck when it comes to his new commitment to recess appointments of potential criminals.
Here is the Wall Street Journal editorial board on the constitutionality of these recess appointments. They say it's unconstitutional, anti-constitutional. It would eliminate one of the basic checks on power that the founders built into the American system of government. If Mr. Trump gets away with it, the next Democrat to win the Oval Office would whoop through left-wing nominees, and whoever holds the presidency would gain unilateral power to name cranks and cronies to offices of immense authority. You talked about opening a Pandora's box by going against tradition earlier in the show. Isn't that what this would do? Would you worry about a Democrat president installing whomever he or she wanted without the restrictions of the Senate confirmation process?
Look, I've been a jealous guardian of the Constitution my entire life, and it was my career before I came to Congress, and I've demonstrated over and over that we will have fidelity to our oath, which is to uphold the Constitution. So we evaluate all these things very carefully. I'm sympathetic to all these arguments. As I said, we'll have to see how this develops. I am very hopeful that the Senate will do its job, and that is provide its advice and consent and move these nominees along. They have an obligation to do a vetting of every nominee, and they will. And we'll see how this plays out. But I think all the hyperbole and everything on the front end here is to distract the American people and to try to stall President Trump in delivering upon that mandate again that the people have given him.
Again, when cornered with the Constitution, Johnson's only answer is that he's a jealous guardian of it and that he'll have his fidelity to the oath. That was right before launching back into putting his thumb on the scale again to tell the Senate to blindly confirm a guy that's embroiled in a very legitimate scandal that actually has a bipartisan group of legislators eager to receive the information that'll allow them to do their job of advice and consent. So before he says his prayers every night, more details behind this is what Johnson is 100% concerned with covering up, I guess in Jesus' name.
I think it was Justice Brandeis who once said that sunlight is the best disinfectant in a democracy. Transparency is always the best course of action, particularly when it relates to high-ranking government officials.
And I'll give you the truth why I'm not Speaker. It's because one person, a member of Congress, wanted me to stop an ethics complaint because he slept with a 17-year-old. An ethics complaint that started before I ever became Speaker, and that's illegal, and I'm not going to get in the middle. Did he do it or not? I don't know. But ethics is looking at it. There's other people in jail because of it. And he wanted me to influence.
No one would even touch him because he was being accused of sleeping with underage girls, which honestly, there was no colleagues that came out and defended him because, quite frankly, the stuff that he would show on the floor and the stuff he would brag about on the floor before he was married, we probably thought, well, that's reasonable, and we would always have to walk away from him.
I served with some real scumbags. Look, Matt Gaetz. He paid minors to have sex with him at drug parties.
The first time I ever met this guy, he walked up to me, and Kristi Noem at the time was at the podium. He was Speaker, or he was elected at the time. He was a member-elect, so we was going through conference and orientation, and he walked up to me as Kristi Noem, now Governor Kristi Noem, and he said, man, she's a fine, and you can put the B word in place there. And I looked at him, I said, really? It was completely out of line, and this is the type of individual Matt Gaetz is.